The Arab Gulf nations began to move against Iran after new missile and drone attacks hit the United Arab Emirates and put Israel on high alert. This Tuesday, May 5th, 2026, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar began to speak out in defense of Arab sovereignty, while Israel increased surveillance and the United States maintained Project Freedom to reopen the maritime passage. What began as Iranian pressure on ships has now turned into a regional front against the Revolutionary Guard. I'll tell you all about that in a moment, but right now you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed with real-time information in the best journalistic quality you've ever seen, with the Milson Alves standard of credibility. The United Arab Emirates was the immediate center of the new escalation. According to recent reports, Emirati air defense systems intercepted 15 missiles and 4 drones launched from Iran. While a fire was reported in the oil industrial zone of Fujairah, a sensitive point for energy and trade in the Gulf. So far, confirmed data from this new round indicate 3 Indian nationals injured, and there is no confirmation of deaths in these most recent attacks. This information is important because it shows that the Iranian offensive caused damage, provoked panic, and injured civilians, but it has not yet crossed the threshold of indirect killing at this stage. The reaction from the Emirates came in 2 ways. The first was internal protection, the second was preparation for the response. The Emirati government announced security measures, schools switched to remote learning, alerts were reinforced, and the air defense resumed operating at wartime pace. At the same time, the Emirati Ministry of Foreign Affairs classified the attacks as a dangerous escalation and stated that the Emirati state has the full right to respond legitimately. This point changed the tone of the crisis because Abu Dhabi did not treat the attack as an accident, but as a direct aggression against its sovereignty. Saudi Arabia moved to the center of the coordination efforts soon after. The Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, spoke with the President of the United Arab Emirates and condemned the Iranian attacks. The Saudi message was clear. Riyadh stands with Abu Dhabi in defending its security and stability. This call was not just a diplomatic gesture. It opened the way for Arab military coordination because the Saudis know that the attack on the Emirates is also a message to the entire Sunni bloc of the Gulf, and that's where the point becomes even stronger. Iran tried to pressure the Emirates, but ended up accelerating the union of the Arab nations, which had been treating Tehran as a common threat. Qatar, which has historically maintained ties with the Iranian regime, also condemned the attacks against the Emirates and called the offensive a violation of Emirati sovereignty. This change is significant because it shows that the Revolutionary Guard, by trying to isolate Abu Dhabi, pushed regional rivals to the same side of the table. Israel also went on alert because any Arab response against Iran could provoke a new reaction from Tehran against Israeli targets, against air routes, and against bases linked to the United States in the Middle East. The logic is simple. If the Emirates and Saudi Arabia attack Iranian targets, the Revolutionary Guard may try to respond on several fronts at the same time using missiles, drones, and allied militias. That's why Israel is monitoring Arab moves as part of the same front to contain Iran. The backdrop is the Strait of Hormuz. The United States launched Project Freedom to re-establish the safe passage of commercial ships on one of the most important routes on the planet. According to reports from the international press, American forces destroyed small Iranian vessels, intercepted drones and missiles, and escorted American-flagged ships through the passage. For Washington, the operation serves to break Iranian maritime blackmail. For Tehran, it represents a loss of control over its main tool for pressuring the world. That's why the Revolutionary Guard has returned to acting aggressively. The blockade on Iranian ports, the American naval presence, and economic pressure leave the regime with few options. Either it agrees to negotiate from a weak position, endures internal strain, or tries to drag the region into a wider war. By attacking the Emirates and threatening navigation in the Gulf, Tehran chose to raise the cost of the crisis. But this choice may have produced the opposite effect. Instead of dividing its rivals, it brought the Arab monarchies together around a possible response. The question now is, what have the Arab nations been doing in the last few hours? They were coordinating positions, reinforcing air defense, restricting parts of the airspace, protecting civil infrastructure, and considering a limited military response. This is not about a full-scale invasion of Iran, nor about occupation. The most likely scenario, if retaliation is authorized, is a targeted action against structures linked to the Revolutionary Guard, with the aim of showing that attacks against the Gulf will have a cost. The final decision, however, involves a sensitive calculation to respond without dismantling the American plan in Hormuz. Donald Trump's role in this scenario is decisive. The American president has already put the United States at the center of the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and knows that a disorganized Arab response could expand the war too soon. That's why Washington tends to control the pace of retaliation. The Arabs want to respond. Israel is prepared. The United States maintains naval pressure. But the White House needs to prevent the Revolutionary Guard from turning a limited punitive action into an open regional war. The crisis also exposed the contrast between rhetoric and force. European leaders condemned the Iranian attacks and spoke of diplomacy. But the dynamics in the Gulf are being defined by those who have air defense, ships, bases, and response capability. The European Union can call for de-escalation. But the United Arab Emirates were hit, Saudi Arabia sided with them, Qatar condemned Tehran, Israel went on alert, and the United States is already operating at sea. In the real-world crisis, statements don't stop drones. The alert sent by the United States to its citizens in the Emirates reinforces the seriousness of the moment. The American embassy advised citizens to stay away from windows and glass doors in case of an air attack, to keep documents accessible, cell phones charged, and basic supplies for prolonged shelter. This kind of guidance is not routine. It indicates that Washington considers a new round of attacks possible and is preparing civilians for a crisis that may continue in the coming days. Recent history helps explain why the Saudis are not treating this threat as a surprise. On September 14, 2019, Saudi Aramco facilities in Abqaiq and Quraysh were attacked by drones and missiles. In an offensive that temporarily knocked out about 5.7 million barrels per day of Saudi production. Riyadh and Washington pointed to Iranian responsibility, while Tehran denied it. That attack showed that Iran and its allies were using energy infrastructure as a target for strategic pressure. Now, in 2026, the same logic appears again, but with the Emirates at the center and with an Arab coalition more willing to react. There are also examples in other nations that show how attacks on routes and energy often generate coalitions. In 1991, after Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, a broad coalition led by the United States brought together Arab and Western nations to expel Saddam Hussein and protect the regional order in the Gulf. The lesson is straightforward. When a regional power threatens energy, borders, and navigation, neighbors who previously had differences end up uniting for survival. The difference now is that the target of this pressure is Iran, and the coordination involves Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, Israel, and the United States. The Abraham Accords also help explain the Israeli alert. Since 2020, the United Arab Emirates and Israel have opened a new phase of diplomatic, economic, and security relations, with Iran as the common threat behind this rapprochement. This bridge has changed the regional map. Before, Tehran could exploit the distance between Arabs and Israelis. Now, each attack against the Emirates pushes Israel closer to defending the Gulf. And every threat against Israel reinforces the Arab calculation that the Revolutionary Guard is a regional problem, not just an Israeli one. The most serious point is that the Iranian attacks occurred amid a fragile ceasefire. This sends a bad message for any negotiation attempt. If Tehran accepts the public pause but allows the Revolutionary Guard to launch drones and missiles against neighbors, the Arabs start to see diplomacy as a cover for aggression. That's the reason for the rush. Abu Dhabi doesn't want to appear vulnerable. Riyadh doesn't want to see Iran dictating the pace in the Gulf. Doha doesn't want to be isolated at a time when the region is closing ranks against Iran. And Israel doesn't want to be caught off guard if the Iranian regime decides to open another front. Now, what happens next depends on three decisions. The first is up to the Emirates and Saudi Arabia, who need to decide whether the response will be symbolic or tougher. The second is up to the United States, who can authorize a controlled retaliation or ask the Arabs to hold back while Project Liberty continues to choke Iran's ability to control Hormuz. The third is up to Iran itself, which can back down to avoid a larger coalition or insist on attacks to try to provoke open war. The Iranian regime seems to be betting on chaos as a tool for survival. By attacking ships, threatening the Strait of Hormuz, and launching drones against the Emirates, it tries to show strength, but the regional response shows something else. The Revolutionary Guard is creating a political and military siege against itself. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar no longer speak merely as concerned governments, they speak as threatened nations. Israel remains on alert. The United States keeps ships, fighter jets, and defenses in operation. In the end, Iran tried to challenge the region, but ended up pushing the Arab nations toward a possible joint response. The region leaves diplomacy behind and begins to prepare for force. I'm Milson Alves, an international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you truthfully informed every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.